Welcome to the Big 12 Insiders, your Big 12 sports show. Here's your host, Brien Hanley.
Hey, everybody, what's going on? This is your man, Big B, Brien Hanley. Welcome back to Big 12 Insiders. Man, we got a good show here for you today. Basically, we are wrapping up the Big 12 season. Now, I know there's baseball that's going on, track and field. There's other sports that are still going on. But obviously on this channel, well, I shouldn't say obviously, but on this channel, we cover basketball and football specifically. So it has come to an end. And so we're going to discuss what it looked like in the new Big 12 with the new members after some more expansion rounds, what year one looked like. We're going to take a deep dive into football and basketball. So appreciate everybody being in here. Thank you guys again, as always, for showing up. Remember to like, follow, subscribe, continue to get in the comments section, and always hit that notification bell so we know exactly when Big 12 Insiders content comes out. So let's get into this. So first off, we're going to start with football. What did it look like year one in football? Well, first thing is we have to acknowledge that football, the standings, the season, whatever you want to call it, it got turned upside down on its head. The teams that everybody thought was going to be at the top of the conference, the Utahs, the Oklahoma States, the Kansas States, ended up being the worst teams. Now, Kansas State wasn't one of the worst teams. They were middle of the pack. But Utah and Oklahoma State were literally at the bottom of the conference. I mean, and they played like it. They were awful. They were awful. They had a moment or two here and there, but for the most part, those teams were bad. That put a stain on the conference right from the jump because the national media, like I said, and all media, when you picked who was going to finish where, you just couldn't anticipate that was going to happen. You know, anything's possible. I think everybody understands that. But nobody was predicting that Utah and Oklahoma State were going to be the worst teams in the Big 12. Like, nobody could have imagined. But that's what happened. That's exactly what happened. And so from an outsider looking in, people just thought, oh, well, the Big 12 must not be very good because the teams that we think are good, they're not any good. So then the conference as a whole, it has to stink. And that couldn't be further from the truth. And then we saw it. We saw it in the playoff. Arizona State got its opportunity. They won the conference, got jobbed out of a game against Texas, and everybody knows it. I don't care when anybody says, yes, Arizona State should have stopped the 4th and 13, and they could have won the football game. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. No excuses. But there's also no excuses for the non-targeting call that everybody under the sun could see. Everybody saw it. Everybody knew it. And yet it goes on call. And don't give me the call, oh, well, Texas got one. There didn't get called. No, it didn't. It wasn't even remotely close to the same thing. But I'm not going to get into that because that's not what this is about today. But we saw Arizona State could compete because Texas is one of the top teams in the SEC, even though they didn't play a top SEC schedule, which ask Oklahoma about scheduling. You know, ask Georgia about scheduling. I mean, there's some tougher schedules out there. Texas played one of the least competitive ones, but they finished second. So you got to give them their credit. They finished second in the conference. It is what it is. But Arizona State was right there. And if you watch that, then if you paid any attention to the Big 12 at all, you knew that BYU was just as good as Arizona State. Just as good. Because I think if that game that they played is in Provo versus at Tempe, I think BYU wins it. But neither here nor there. I don't want to get into a back and forth between Arizona State and BYU. But I think my point is that BYU was just as good and deserved to be in the playoff, especially over a team with the same record that BYU actually beat. But, hey, they qualified for another game, and then they got beat, and then they soundly got trounced because they didn't belong. BYU did. We all know it. It is what it is. So you look at the rankings. 4 teams finished the final rankings. That is 4 teams finish in the top 25. 2 in the top 13. Again, how SMU finishes ahead of BYU when SMU has one more loss. And yeah, they got into the playoffs, so they have one more loss. And SMU beat them. Or excuse me, BYU beat them. I mean, but again, the committee told us that on the field doesn't matter. I mean, they literally told us that results on the field doesn't matter because you put a team in as the last team in over another team that had beat them. This is where we're going with this thing, man. At some point, we just got to get some make sense stuff as far as people in the committee. It just can't all be about money. I understand it's a business, and we're kidding ourselves if we don't think the college football playoff is a business. It is, and I'm not opposed to it being a business. But a lot of times business has to do make sense stuff. The college football playoff has to do that as well. You gotta have some make sense. The results on the field during the regular season have to matter. And if they don't, then don't have a regular season. That would be my pushback. But again, I don't want to get sidetracked and go off on a rant. But that's where we are. We had 4 teams ranked in the top 25 at the end of the season. Now, here's the thing, is that most thought that the conference was going to fall apart. Most thought because Oklahoma and Texas, and they had been such a dominant, well, not necessarily Texas, but Oklahoma for almost 2 decades had run the Big 12. You could say maybe not the last year. I won't get, obviously they weren't good the last year, maybe the last 2 years, but just the last year. But there was a 14, 15-year stretch. Oklahoma just dominated this conference. They did. We can't deny it. Not saying that there weren't other good teams, but the standard in the Big 12 was Oklahoma. Now, Texas fans will be mad, but what are you going to be mad about? I mean, how many conference titles did you win? I'll just start there. And then that'll be the end of the conversation. How many did you win? How many did Oklahoma win? End of conversation. So there was a standard bearer. And when you take that away, people just, Big 12's not going to be very good. They're not going to be able to compete. They don't have any blue blood programs any longer. And we don't. Oklahoma and Texas were the last 2. And so they just thought, it is what it is. It's an afterthought. We're not going to respect them. They don't deserve respect. So it is what it is. And I think Arizona State went a long way to gaining a lot of respect because you saw the national media, outside of people that are on ESPN, jumped on the bandwagon of Arizona State and said, yeah, they got jobbed. They got jobbed. They should have moved on to the semifinals, and we all saw it. We all saw you. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. So maybe the Big 12 actually is pretty good. Maybe they are a good conference because we saw Arizona State. If we're saying that Texas is a good team and Arizona State basically playing a road game, the game was in or Arlington, Texas. I mean, that's a road game. And they competed and got jobbed out of the game. Okay, well, they're pretty good. Well, if they're pretty good, BYU, it was a Hail Mary pass at the end of the game. It came down to that. It came down to a Hail Mary. So BYU must be pretty good too. Maybe we should take another look at this. And I think that's going to bode well for the Big 12 moving into next season. Some of the respect that they're going to get. Now, it has to go further. It has to go further. We can't stop at, we got close. We got to go further. And it's got to be in the playoff. It has to be. Because, number one, here's the thing. Playing against Big Ten, SEC teams, not enough of the big boys or the shakers and movers in those conferences are going to play against the big boys in the Big 12. Not going to see a lot of that. So even if you did, football is not the same as basketball when it comes to non-conference games. And this is what I mean by that, is that in football, if Alabama, plays against Northwestern, well, it's a Big Ten team, but it's Northwestern, and they beat them, that's an SEC win over a Big Ten win or over a Big Ten team. If Ohio State plays Mississippi State, it's an SEC team, and they blow them out, well, that's a Big Ten victory over an SEC school. So, and that's what you see. You see a lot of those matchups. Every now and then you might get middle-of-the-road teams playing each other. And from time to time, like this year, we're going to see Ohio State against Texas. But that's one game. Like Michigan, Ohio State, USC, Oregon, all of those teams, if you just say, okay, we're going to come up like they do in basketball, we're going to come up with a Big Ten SEC challenge. We're going to take 5 of our best to play 5 of your best. And again, perceived best. Then we can figure out some stuff. They're never going to do that in football because you lose too many games, you're not going to qualify. So they're never going to do that. In basketball, and we'll talk about basketball as a whole, but in basketball, that's how the SEC got its reputation this year. They got their reputation because in the non-conference schedule, they beat the brakes off of everybody else. Look, you can argue with whoever you want to, but if we're being honest, and I'm always going to be honest, I may not like what I have to say, but I'm going to be honest. The SEC was just better because they won. They proved it. Well, getting back to football's never going to do that. Because, again, you lose too many games. The SEC won't even play a 9th conference game because they're afraid of losses. So they won't even do that. You're telling me they're going to sign up for a Big Ten challenge? They're not going to do that. Or a Big 12 challenge. They're not going to do that, but for different reasons. They don't want to – it's like they don't want to give the Big 12 the opportunity to get on a bigger stage. Well, what are you talking about, Big B? Well, SEC is the best football conference. It is. Okay, not top to bottom. Every team in the SEC isn't some dominant football team, but it is better than the Big 12. Well, if you sign up for that, then you take the 5 best of the SEC and the 5 best of the Big 12. The SEC doesn't want to give them an opportunity to come out on top. That's what I mean. And if you want to, well, they're not scared. Yeah, they are. They are scared. Not individual matchups as a whole, but the SEC is king. Why would you give a contender a shot if you don't have to? Just think about like in boxing. Now, boxing's corrupt, but I would feel the same way about college football. I don't know if it's as corrupt as boxing, but it's pretty bad. And we see it all the time. But in boxing, if you don't have to fight a top contender, you don't do it. You don't give them the opportunity if you don't have to. This is the same thing. So they would never do that. And I believe it's for that reason alone. They would never do that. So the reputation is going to have to come in postseason, getting all the way back to the original point. Got to go and get it in the postseason because that's where the credibility lies. And we can no longer just say we're getting close. Hell, look what they've done to TCU. They don't even count TCU's victory over Michigan. Nobody even talks about that. All they talk about is how they got slaughtered in the national championship game. And they did. But nobody even brings up the fact that they had to beat Michigan, who some were saying that was the most physical team in the history of college football. That's what people were saying at the time about that Michigan team. And TCU beat them at their own game. Nobody mentions it. So you got to earn it in the postseason, and you got to win. And if you win, and then if you do lose, you can't get slaughtered. Like if Arizona State would have lost to Texas by 4 touchdowns, the conference would have taken a gigantic hit. Yep, you see, we let the Big 12 in. This is what they give us. Now it's like, yeah, the Big 12, they're pretty good. I mean, I know we had to hose them out of winning, but man, they're pretty good. Maybe we should have put BYU in. Look at SMU. Having to go up and play in cold weather and had no clue how to adapt to any of that. No chance. Game was ugly. Maybe we should have given BYU a chance. We'll take that in consideration next year. But now it's time to win. You got to start winning. You can't just, well, we got close. No, you'll never get the respect from just getting close. It doesn't mean anything because all you'll be is little brother, and they'll just keep patting you on the head. Hey, man, good job. Man, you fought hard. You know, because there is nothing, and I can speak to this from personal experience, there is nothing more humiliating than losing a game and having opposing fans say, hey, man, you tried hard, man. Good game. Man, y'all really fought. No, I don't want to hear that. I'd rather you rub it in my face than to say, good job. Good job. Yeah, no. Ugh. And whether we played good or not, if we lost, I don't need the opposing fans telling me how good we played. This is the same thing. I don't need SEC teams and Big Ten teams. Either, hey, man, you all had a fighting chance out there. Better luck next year. No, I don't want to hear that. I want to hear them say, shit, the Big 12 is really good. That's what I want to hear. The Big 12 is good. Damn. We got to watch out for them. They may get 3 teams in this thing. If all their teams are like this, that'll make for a better playoff. That's what I want to hear from their fans. So, but that's just me. Moving on to basketball. Look, I don't think there's any doubt or any question that there is a new sheriff in town as far as the Big 12 is concerned. And it's Houston. You know, now KU fans are going to be so bent out of shape. They get so mad when you say that there's a new sheriff, there's a new dominant team in the Big 12. Well, the proof is in the pudding. Well, come on, Big B. They didn't dominate the conference as long as we did. Well, they weren't in the conference as long. You know, that's like when they talk about, you know, second-year guys in the NFL. And they talked about Patrick Mahomes. Perfect example. Well, Patrick, how can you say he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league? He had only played 1 season. His first year he was there. He was the backup. The next year, he was the MVP of the league. Oh, man, you can't say he's the best player. Well, why? Well, he's only played 1 year. Exactly. He's only played 1 year. I mean, just because I've only played 1 year doesn't mean that I can't be the best when I get in. It just means I've only had 1 opportunity. That's it. So, you know, the number of years that you dominate something doesn't matter. Not in my eyes. Now, it can give you some longevity, which I like longevity. I think that's a thing. You know, I know some people, LeBron, longevity doesn't mean anything. Yeah, it does. Stop it. So I give you that. But if Houston's only been in the league 2 years, and they've won the league twice this past year in dominant fashion, what else do you want me to say? Like, what are you wanting them to prove to you? Well, they got to do it over a longer period of time. Well, okay. But as of right now, they are the dominant team in the conference, and it's not up for debate. It just isn't. You know, it just isn't. Not to mention they just played the national championship game. They gave that game away. But I don't want to get talking about that because it makes me upset. Because, the thing that made Houston tough all year was their toughness in the last 3 minutes. And literally in the national championship game, they decided to fall apart. Disgusting, but let's move on. I don't want to talk about that. But there's a new sheriff, and it's Houston. Now, don't get me wrong. There's other teams that are vying for it. Arizona, BYU, Texas Tech, you know, Iowa State's still good. KU's still good. Baylor, little inconsistent this year, but you know they'll be good. You know, the conference is good. But here's the thing. I think they need to get at least 2 more teams to move up to the upper echelon of the conference. Now, here's the thing. You have 16 teams. Everybody can't win 14, 15 games in the conference. It's just not possible for that to happen. But there still needs to be 2 other teams that jump up. For instance, getting 7 in the tournament. No, don't get me wrong. I know West Virginia should have been in. But, again, you can't lose to Colorado when you're on the bubble in the Big 12 championship game, the first game that you play in the Big 12 tournament. You can't lose that basketball game. You did. So while you still should have been in over Texas, Oklahoma, North Carolina, you didn't have that strong of an argument because you blew your chances losing to the last place team in the Big 12. That's on you. Having said that, we need 2 other teams to take a step up to get the reign of supreme as the conference back. We need 2 other teams. Because, again, I just talked to you earlier about what the SEC did in the non-conference. That's where the SEC made their bones this year. It was the non-conference. They crushed everybody. Big 12's got to get back to that. They got to get back to crushing everybody in the non-conference, putting out a better showing, at least that, putting out a better showing. And then you can get talking about, okay, you know what? The Big 12 is pretty good. Now, there's no doubt that teams are different than what they were in November versus the end of the year. Teams are different. You're either better or you're worse. But the same cachet that everybody was giving West Virginia earlier in the season, I know they had an injury. I get that. They weren't very good down the stretch because teams are different, man. KU, biggest win. They beat Duke. All the stuff they did early in the season, you're thinking, man, Kansas is going to walk through the Big 12. They did not. They were not the same team at all. And by the end of it, there's not a whole lot of people out there that believe KU was even good. They were just an average basketball team. Hell, Bill Self basically said that they were an average basketball team. So things can change, man. But either way, the perception didn't change for the SEC. While a lot of those teams won games early on, the perception never went away because they had won all those games early on. Then they were just battling each other, and they would just say, oh, it's a meat grinder in the SEC basketball this year in 2025. Well, we need to start creating our meat grinder, but it starts in the non-conference. It's different in football than it is in basketball, but it starts there. Because in basketball, 1-game tournaments, unless you have in the Final Four, you got 3 teams, or in the Elite 8, you got 5 teams, 6 teams, something like that. You can't really, claim supremacy. You can't. The SEC had 7 teams in the Sweet 16. That's a pretty good number, man. Now, you can say that they manipulated it because, they had 14 teams in. You still have to win the games. You still have to go win. Big 12 got a ton of teams in 2024. By Sweet 16 time, they had 2. Elite 8, 0. So, you can put all those teams in, but you still got to win. Somebody's got to win, And I don't want to hear about, the averages, and don't give me that. Go win a basketball game. That's all I want to hear. So that's what I think we need to do as far as hoops. We got to get back to that. If we can, I think we got a shot, people. I think we got a shot at some supremacy here, or at least getting back up on that stage. But overall, in conclusion, man, I just think the Big 12 had a good first year with all of its new members included. I think it had a good first year. I actually like the fact that Utah and Oklahoma State took a dive in football. I know Utes and Cowboy fans aren't going to be happy with me saying that. But I like the fact because there was some new blood that came in and won this thing. Like I said, Arizona State was picked to finish last. They ended up finishing first. And they were a really good football team. So be interesting to see what goes on in year 2 and how that shakes out. We had a couple of coaching changes, but we'll see. We'll see how this thing shakes out for everybody, man. So appreciate everybody being here. Thank you as always. Remember, follow, subscribe, get in the comment section, and hit the notification bell so you know when Big 12 Insiders content comes out. Appreciate you guys. We will talk to you soon.
Thank you for watching the Big 12 Insiders, your Big 12 sports show. This has been a Spirit Street production.